He, a powerful and solitary tycoon, skeptical about love. She, a tireless single mom facing humiliation and prejudice. At a corporate event, Maria Eduarda is publicly humiliated because of her circumstances. Ethan, witnessing the scene, is moved by her pain and dignity. Driven by compassion and attraction, he defends her. In a moment of vulnerability, she confesses her struggles. Ethan, already falling for her, takes her hand and declares, "Maria Eduarda, stop humiliating yourself. I love you and I love your son. Let me be his father. I want to be Pedro's father." Get ready for a twist where a tycoon becomes a father out of love and defies society, and a humiliated single mom finds redemption and the family she always dreamed of. Watch this story till the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing, Maria Eduarda Santos adjusted her navy blue uniform for the third time that morning, checking if every button was in place. The mirror in the women's locker room on the 30th floor of the corporate building, the Manhattan Tower, reflected a 32-year-old woman with determined brown eyes. Dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and a posture that even in the face of adversity never completely broke. "Morning, Mrs. Santos," greeted Joanne, the cleaning supervisor, with a warm smile. "Early again today." Pedro woke up at 5, full of energy. Maria Eduarda smiled, carrying the breakfast tray. "I took the opportunity to get here early and prepare everything calmly." The truth was that sleep had become a luxury since she started working as a catering assistant at Sterling Investments. Between shifts at the office, caring for Pedro, and the attention her mother, Mrs. Noosa, needed after her stroke, rest hours were few and precious. But Maria Eduarda never complained. Every dollar of her salary was a victory. Every day worked meant food on the table and medicine for her mother. The elevator ascended silently to the 42nd floor, where the heart of Ethan Sterling's empire operated. The doors opened to reveal an environment of glass and steel, where every detail breathed power and sophistication. Impeccably dressed secretaries typed on state-of-the-art computers. Executives in expensive suits discussed business in meeting rooms with views of all of Manhattan. Maria Eduarda knew every corner of that floor. She knew that Mr. Sterling drank black coffee, unsweetened, always in the same white porcelain cup. She knew that he arrived punctually at 7:30, that he preferred ice water at afternoon meetings, and that, despite all the grandeur, he had never treated her with disrespect. 30 floors below, Ethan Sterling finished reviewing the latest reports in the back seat of his Maybach. New York traffic spared no one, not even the most powerful, but he had turned those minutes into extensions of his office. At 39, he commanded an empire valued in billions, but his personal life was an emotional desert he preferred not to explore. "We're here, Mr. Sterling," announced Milton, his driver of 5 years. "Thank you, Milton. Today I have meetings until late. You can go home after dropping me off." Ethan adjusted his Italian tie and grabbed his leather briefcase. His reflection in the mirrored elevator doors showed a tall, athletic man with dark hair, some gray at the temples, and gray eyes that seemed to calculate every move around him. Successful, respected, envied, and deeply lonely. The doors of the 42nd floor opened, and Ethan was greeted by the controlled buzz of his company. He greeted employees with polite but distant nods. Relationships were complications he had learned to avoid. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling." Maria Eduarda appeared with the coffee tray, as every morning. "Your coffee just the way you like it." "Thank you," he replied, barely lifting his eyes from the documents. Maria Eduarda was already used to the professional coldness. She did not expect familiarity. She just respected the hierarchy and did her job as best as possible. While organizing the support table in the meeting room, her cell phone vibrated discreetly in her pocket. A message from Pedro's school. "Urgent, Pedro is unwell. Please come immediately." Maria Eduarda's world collapsed in seconds. Her hands trembled as she typed a response to the teacher, promising to arrive quickly. She put away the phone, took a deep breath, and headed to the desk of Carlotta, Ethan's executive secretary. Carlotta, I need to leave. It's an emergency with my son. Maria, you know you can't leave during work hours without authorization, Carlotta whispered, casting nervous glances towards the CEO's office. Mr. Sterling has a meeting with the Japanese delegation in an hour. Please, it's my son. He's at school, he's unwell. I can't authorize it. You need to talk to him. Maria Eduarda felt the despair grow in her chest. Pedro was everything to her. She couldn't leave him alone, sick, waiting. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked determinedly to Ethan's office door. She knocked 3 times, waited for the answer, and entered. Mr. Sterling, I apologize for the interruption. Her voice came out firm, despite the nervousness. I need to leave early today. My son is sick at school. Ethan raised his eyes from the documents for the first time that morning, really observing the woman in front of him. He noticed her interlaced hands, the tension in her shoulders, the moist glow in her brown eyes that she was trying to hide. Leave early? He repeated, closing the report. We have a meeting with the Japanese delegation in an hour. I know, sir, but my son, he's only 5 years old and the school said it's urgent. For a moment that seemed eternal, Ethan studied her. There was something in the controlled vulnerability of that woman that affected him in an unexpected way. Something that cracked, even if subtly, the armor he had built around his heart. Go, he said finally, and take my car. Milton will take you. Maria Eduarda blinked, not believing what she was hearing. Sir, my driver will take you to school. It's faster than public transportation. Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Thank you very much. When she hurried out, Ethan remained standing for long minutes, questioning the impulse that had led him to break his own rule of not getting involved in employees' personal problems. He did not imagine that that moment of compassion would be just the first step of a journey that would forever transform their lives. The next day, Maria Eduarda arrived at work carrying more than just the morning coffee tray. She carried a mix of gratitude and embarrassment that had kept her awake part of the night. Pedro was fine, just a passing bug, but Ethan Sterling's unexpected kindness echoed in her thoughts like a persistent melody. How's Pedro? Asked Joanne, the supervisor, as Maria Eduarda organized the break room supplies. Better, thank you. Just a little fever, she replied, but her hands trembled slightly as she handled the porcelain cups. Joanne, do you think I should formally thank Mr. Sterling? I mean, besides what I already said yesterday. Joanne stopped counting the sugar packets and looked at her with a maternal expression. Maria, honey, men like him do these things and forget about it the next minute. Best not to draw unnecessary attention. Just keep doing your job well, that's what he expects. But Maria Eduarda couldn't simply forget. For years, she had learned that kindness without self-interest was rare in the world. That powerful men didn't lift a finger without expecting something in return. Ethan's gesture intrigued her as much as it frightened her. At 7:30 sharp, the elevator doors opened to reveal Ethan Sterling. He wore a dark grey suit that highlighted his grey eyes, and Maria Eduarda surprised herself noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way he adjusted his shirt cuffs, the controlled way he greeted employees, the loneliness disguised as authority in every movement. Good morning, Mr. Sterling, she approached with the tray, trying to keep her voice professional. Your coffee. Good morning. How's your son? The question caught her off guard. Ethan had raised his eyes from the documents and was watching her with an attention that made her heart race uncomfortably. He's fine, sir. It was just a bug. Thank you very much for your help yesterday. It was nothing, he replied, but continued looking at her a moment longer than necessary. Milton said you got to the school quickly. Yes, you made all the difference. We brought this for you. Maria Eduarda took a small handmade card from her uniform pocket. It was a colorful drawing by Pedro, a man in a suit next to a car, with the words "Thank you" written in crooked child's letters. Ethan took the card and for the first time in years felt something stir in the closed-off chest he called a heart. The drawing was simple, innocent, but carried a sincerity that hit him like a punch to the gut. He wanted to make it to thank you, Maria Eduarda explained, misinterpreting his silence as displeasure. I know you're very busy, but Pedro insisted. It's very nice, Ethan interrupted, carefully placing the card in his desk drawer with unusual care. And tell him I liked it. The smile she gave him was like sunshine breaking through dark clouds, spontaneous, genuine, completely transforming her face. Ethan found himself observing the dimple that appeared in her left cheek, the way her brown eyes sparkled with happiness. I will, sir. He'll be very happy. When Maria Eduarda left the room, Ethan remained motionless for several minutes, looking towards the closed door. There was something about that woman, in the way she spoke of her son, in her sincere gratitude, in the dignity with which she carried her difficulties, that bothered him in a strange way. He couldn't remember the last time someone had surprised him. Throughout the day, he caught himself paying attention to her movements around the office. The efficient way she organized meetings, the respectful way she treated all employees, the discretion with which she performed her tasks. Maria Eduarda was almost invisible in the corporate environment, but to him, inexplicably, she was beginning to become a striking presence. In the afternoon, while reviewing contracts, Ethan heard raised voices coming from the break room area. He immediately recognized the arrogant tone of Patricia Mendoza, marketing director and ex-girlfriend who insisted on special treatment even after the end of the superficial relationship they had maintained for a few months. I can't believe you still serve coffee in this company, Patricia's voice echoed down the hall. Some little maid, single mother? What impression does that give our clients? Patricia, please. Maria Eduarda's voice sounded low, controlled. I'm just doing my job. Your job? Honey, women like you should be more careful about getting involved with married men. I see how you look at Ethan. Ethan felt his blood boil. He rose from his chair with such force that the documents flew off the table. There were many things he tolerated in the corporate environment, but gratuitous humiliation was not one of them. Patricia! His voice cut through the air like a blade when he appeared at the entrance to the break room. My office now! The confrontation was quick and decisive. Patricia tried to justify herself, claiming professional jealousy, but Ethan was relentless. He would not tolerate employees being personally attacked, regardless of hierarchy. When he returned to the break room, he found Maria Eduarda picking up shards of a broken cup. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she avoided his gaze. Are you okay? He asked, crouching down to help her with the pieces of porcelain. I'm fine, sir. Sorry for the trouble. You don't have to apologize for anything. His fingers brushed against hers when they both reached for the same shard. The contact was brief, electric, and made her raise her eyes to meet his. For a moment, the world of the office disappeared. There was only the unexpected proximity, the masculine scent of his cologne, the gray intensity of his gaze. Mr. Sterling, she whispered, not knowing exactly what she wanted to say. He abruptly stepped back as if he had touched fire. Finish up here and you can leave early today, he said, returning to professional formality with a brutality that hurt her more than Patricia's words. Maria Eduarda spent the rest of the afternoon trying to understand what had happened. The way he had defended her, then the sudden coldness. The contradictory signals confused her and, even worse, awakened feelings that she couldn't allow herself to have. At night, while Pedro played in the small apartment in the Bronx, she wondered if she wasn't imagining things. Men like Ethan Sterling weren't interested in women like her. The difference between their worlds was an insurmountable abyss. But the next day, she found an envelope with her name on her desk. Inside, a business card and a handwritten note. If you need anything for your son, call this number ES. Maria Eduarda kept the card in the heart of her uniform, feeling that something definitive had changed between them. Something dangerous and impossible, but undeniably real. A week after the incident with Patricia, fate forced another encounter between Ethan and Maria Eduarda. The thunderstorm that hit New York City that Thursday night turned the streets into raging rivers, and the public transportation system collapsed. It was almost 10 at night when Maria Eduarda finally finished organizing the meeting room after a corporate event that had extended beyond working hours. The building was practically empty. Only a few lights remained on the upper floors, including Ethan's office, who was working late reviewing an international contract. Maria Eduarda had tried calling several ride-sharing apps, but all were unavailable due to the storm. The money for a regular cab was budgeted precisely. She needed to save every penny for Mrs. News's medication. "Still here?" The deep voice startled her. Ethan was standing in the entrance to the break room, with his shirt sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened. For the first time, she saw him without the impeccable armor of power. "Mr. Sterling," she stood up quickly. "I was just waiting for the rain to let up a little." He looked out the window, where lightning illuminated the dark New York sky. "This will last for hours. How do you plan to get home?" Maria Eduarda hesitated. She didn't want to seem like a problem employee, but she couldn't lie either. "The subway, sir, when it starts running again. With this rain, there won't be any public transportation tonight." Ethan picked up the phone and dialed. "Milton, I know you should already be home, but I need a favor." 20 minutes later, Maria Eduarda found herself in the back seat of Ethan's Maybach, watching the city blurred by the raindrops on the window. The silence in the car was filled with a tension that neither knew how to break. "The Bronx is far," Ethan commented, looking at the car's GPS. "It's where I can afford the rent," she replied simply, without bitterness, just stating a fact. "And your son doesn't mind being alone until late?" "Pedro stays with my mother. She needs special care after a stroke, but she can still take care of him for a few hours." Ethan processed the information. A single mother supporting a child and caring for a sick mother. The extent of the responsibility she carried on her shoulders impressed him. "That must be tough," he said, and there was something different in his voice. Less formal, more human. "Everyone has their battles," Maria Eduarda replied, looking at him through the rearview mirror. "I imagine loneliness is one of them." The observation caught him off guard. Few dared to comment on his personal life, and no one had ever done so with such simplicity and accuracy. "Why do you say that?" "It's just the way you work late every day. As if you have nowhere to go." She blushed, realizing she had been too bold. "Sorry, it's none of my business." "No," Ethan said after a moment. "You're right. Sometimes it's easier to stay at the office than to go home." The GPS announced that they had arrived at their destination. The low-income apartment building contrasted sharply with the upscale neighborhoods they had passed through. Ethan observed the lit windows, imagined the families gathered behind each one, and felt a pang of something he didn't identify. "Thank you," Maria Eduarda said, already with her hand on the door handle. "For the ride. Again." Wait, the word came out before he could think. "It's too late to go up alone. I'll walk you to your door." "You don't have to, sir. It's just up 3 flights. I insist." The apartment was small but impeccably clean and organized. It had the smell of home that Ethan hadn't felt in years, a mix of home-cooked food, cleaning products, and family love. Pedro was sleeping soundly on the sofa bed in the living room, hugging a worn teddy bear. Mrs. Newser, a white-haired lady with gentle eyes, stood up, supported by a cane. "Mom, this is Mr. Sterling, my boss," Maria Eduarda introduced. "Mr. Sterling, my mother Newser." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Newser." "The pleasure is mine, Doctor. My daughter always speaks of you with great respect." Ethan stayed for a few minutes, discreetly observing that family. The way Maria Eduarda adjusted the blanket over Pedro, checked if Mrs. Newser had taken her medication, quickly organized the kitchen. There was a familiar dance there, a silent harmony that fascinated him. "Pedro has a bit of a cold," Mrs. Newser commented. "He had to miss school today." "He doesn't like to miss school," Maria Eduarda explained, stroking her sleeping son's hair. "He says he wants to be important when he grows up. I don't think he really understands what that means, but..." Ethan crouched beside the sofa, observing the child's angelic face. There was something in the innocence of that boy that moved him in an unexpected way. "He looks like you," he said softly. "Everyone says that, Maria Eduarda smiled, but Ethan caught a shadow passing through her eyes. Pedro never met his father. The information was said casually, but Ethan noticed the tension that settled in the room. Mrs. Noosa looked away, and Maria Eduarda stood up quickly, as if wanting to change the subject. "Did he leave when he found out about the pregnancy?" Ethan asked gently. "It's complicated." Maria Eduarda wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture he was beginning to recognize. Some people aren't prepared for the responsibilities that life brings. "Maria," Mrs. Noosa began to say, but her daughter shook her head almost imperceptibly. Ethan noticed the exchange of glances between mother and daughter. There was something that wasn't being said, a secret that weighed on that family. The way Maria Eduarda avoided talking about Pedro's father, the tension that settled in when the subject came up, everything indicated that there was more to the story than she had revealed. "Well," he said, respecting the obvious boundaries, "it's late. I should go." "Thank you," Maria Eduarda accompanied him to the door. "For everything." In the hallway, Ethan turned to her one last time. "Maria Eduarda, if you need anything at all, call the number I left. Why are you being so kind to me?" The question came out in a vulnerable whisper. Ethan studied her for a long moment. The hair loose framing her face, the brown eyes full of questions he didn't know how to answer. The silent strength that emanated from her, even in moments of fragility. "Because you deserve kindness," he said finally, surprising both of them with the honesty of the answer. During the drive back, Ethan couldn't get the image of that small but united family out of his mind, especially the way Maria Eduarda had changed the subject about Pedro's father and Mrs. Noosa's worried look. There were secrets in that house, and he surprised himself wanting to know them. But more than that, he surprised himself wanting to protect that woman and that boy from any pain the past might bring. The 2 weeks had passed since the night of the storm, and the dynamic between Ethan and Maria Eduarda had subtly changed. He had started asking about Pedro in the mornings. She smiled more naturally when she served him coffee, and both pretended not to notice how their glances lingered longer than professionally appropriate. It was an ordinary Tuesday when Maria Eduarda's phone rang during lunch. The display showed the number of Pedro's school, and her heart immediately leaped into her throat. In the 5 years since she had become a mother, she had learned that calls from the school never brought good news. "Hello, Mrs. Santos? This is Principal Carmen. Pedro fainted during gym class. We're taking him to St. Luke's Hospital. You need to come immediately." Maria Eduarda's world collapsed. Her hands trembled so much that she almost dropped the phone. "Hospital, emergency." The words echoed in her mind like hammer blows. "I'm coming," she managed to say, hanging up the phone with unsteady fingers. She ran to Carlotta's desk, who was having lunch in the break room. "Carlotta, I need to leave. Pedro's at the hospital. Maria, you know you can't just leave like that. Mr. Sterling has a meeting at 3. My son is in the hospital." Her voice came out louder than she intended, attracting curious glances from the other employees. "Please," but Carlotta shook her head, inflexible. "Without his authorization, I can't release anyone." Maria Eduarda felt tears burning her eyes. There was no time for red tape. Pedro needed her. She grabbed her purse and headed to the elevator, determined to leave with or without permission, even if it cost her her job. "Maria Eduarda." Ethan's deep voice made her stop in the middle of the hallway. He had come out of his office upon hearing the commotion. "What happened?" "Mr. Sterling, my son, he fainted at school. They're taking him to the hospital. I need to go." Ethan saw the despair in her eyes, the way her hands trembled holding the strap of her purse, and made a decision that would change everything between them. "Milton!" he shouted to the driver who was in the hallway. "Get the car! We're going to St. Luke's Hospital." "Sir?" Milton looked confused. "Now, Milton." During the drive to the hospital, Maria Eduarda couldn't stop trembling. Ethan, sitting next to her in the back seat, watched her anguish with a pain in his chest that he didn't fully understand. Without thinking, he reached out and covered her hand with his. "It's going to be okay," he said, surprised by the tenderness in his own voice. "He's never fainted before," she whispered, squeezing his fingers as if they were her only link to sanity. "If anything happens to Pedro, I won't be able to. Nothing's going to happen. Kids are strong. Do you have children?" The question came out between tears. "No." Ethan's answer was loaded with a melancholy that Maria Eduarda, even in the midst of her despair, noticed. "I never had the opportunity or the courage." At the hospital, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Maria Eduarda ran to the reception desk, Ethan right behind her, and they were directed to pediatrics. Pedro was conscious but pale, connected to monitors that showed numbers she didn't understand. "Mommy!" The boy stretched out his little arms when he saw her. "My love, Mommy's here." Maria Eduarda leaned over the bed, kissing her son's feverish forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Dizzy and sleepy." Dr. Henry Smith, the attending pediatrician, appeared with a clipboard of tests. "Mrs. Santos, we need to talk." In the hallway, away from Pedro, the doctor explained the situation with the professional kindness of someone who had delivered many difficult news. "Your son has severe anemia. The tests show very low iron levels, in addition to other worrying indicators. We need more tests to understand the cause, but he will need to be hospitalized for observation and treatment." Maria Eduarda felt her legs weaken. Hospitalization meant lost work days, medical bills she couldn't pay, expensive medications she would need to buy. "For how long?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "At least a week, maybe longer, depending on the results of the additional tests." Ethan, who had remained silently beside her, stepped forward. "Dr. Pedro will have the best treatment available. Private room, specialists, all the necessary tests. Can you arrange that?" "Sir," Maria Eduarda started to protest, but Ethan interrupted her with a firm look. "And also," he continued, addressing the doctor, "I would like Dr. Michael Reynolds, a pediatric hematologist, to be consulted. I've heard great things about his work." "Of course, Mr. Sterling." "Ethan Sterling." The doctor recognized the name immediately, and his posture changed to even more deferential. "It will be arranged immediately, Mr. Sterling." When they were alone in the hallway, Maria Eduarda turned to Ethan with tears in her eyes. "I can't accept this. I have no way to pay." "It's not about money," he said, and there was an intensity in his gray eyes that she had never seen before. "It's about Pedro. He needs the best care. Why are you doing this?" "I don't understand," Ethan approached, his hands gently holding her arms. For a moment, in the middle of the hospital hallway, with the smell of disinfectant and the distant sound of monitors, they were just a man and a woman, connected by something that transcended logic or social convenience. "Because," he started, then stopped, as if the words were too dangerous to be said. "Because you matter to me, more than you should." The kiss happened inevitably. Ethan leaned in and touched his lips to hers, a soft and desperate contact that carried all the weight of the forced proximity, the shared vulnerability, the attraction they had been denying. Maria Eduarda responded to the kiss, forgetting for a moment where she was, who they were, and all the reasons why this couldn't happen. When they parted, both were breathless and frightened by the intensity of what they had felt. "Ethan," she whispered, using his name for the first time. "I know," he replied, understanding all the concerns she hadn't verbalized. "I know this is crazy." In the days that followed, Ethan transformed into a constant presence at the hospital. He appeared after work, brought food for Maria Eduarda, who refused to leave Pedro's side, talked to the doctors, ensured that nothing was missing. He found himself singing off-key children's songs to make Pedro laugh, helping with puzzles, inventing stories about corporate superheroes. The transformation was evident to everyone. Hospital staff commented on Mrs. Santos's devoted husband. Doctors praised the present father who asked all the right questions. Maria Eduarda didn't correct them, and Tiago surprisingly didn't either. On Thursday night, while Pedro finally slept peacefully after a successful blood transfusion, Ethan and Maria Eduarda found themselves alone in the waiting room. She was huddled in an uncomfortable armchair, and he approached, offering her a coffee. "The doctors say he'll make a full recovery," Ethan said, sitting next to her. Thanks to you, she replied, accepting the hot coffee. I don't know how I'll ever be able to repay you. I don't want repayment. I want... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Maria Eduarda, these past few days have changed something in me. Seeing you with Pedro, seeing how you love each other, being close to this family you've built. It's made me realize how empty my life is. Ethan, I've fallen in love, he said, the words coming out in an urgent whisper. With you, with Pedro, with this beautiful and terrifying thing that is having a family. I know it's impossible. I know we're from different worlds, but Maria Eduarda's cell phone rang, interrupting the confession. It was an unknown number. Hello, Maria? It's Frank. The color drained completely from her face. Ethan saw her hands trembling again, but this time it wasn't fear for Pedro. It was a much deeper terror. How did you get my number? She whispered. That doesn't matter. I heard my son is in the hospital. I'm coming back to New York. The call ended, and Maria Eduarda stared at the phone as if it were a poisonous snake. Who was that? Ethan asked, already knowing that the answer would change everything. Pedro's father, she said, her voice almost inaudible. He's coming back. Frank Carlson arrived at St. Luke's Hospital the next morning like an approaching storm. At 35, he maintained the same appearance that had seduced Maria Eduarda 7 years ago. Tall, wavy brown hair, a winning smile, and that air of confidence that perfectly masked his opportunistic character. He wore a well-cut suit, not the quality of the ones Ethan wore, but good enough to impress. Maria Eduarda was in the room with Pedro when he appeared at the door. The boy was playing with a puzzle that Ethan had brought, still pale, but already much more lively after 3 days of treatment. Upon seeing Frank, she rose instinctively, placing herself between him and her son's bed. What a surprise to find you in a private hospital, Frank said, his eyes scanning the luxurious room. From what I hear, things have gotten much better for you, Maria. What do you want, Frank? To see my son, of course. He tried to approach the bed, but Maria Eduarda didn't move. Pedro, do you remember your dad? Pedro hid behind his mother, clearly uncomfortable with the stranger who claimed to be his father. He doesn't remember you because you've never been present, Maria Eduarda said, her voice low but firm. And you're not going to start now. What hostility, Maria? I've been away for work, you know that. You disappeared when you found out about the pregnancy. Don't lie to me. Frank smiled, that smile that she once found charming and now recognized as cruel. Things have changed. I have a better job now, financial stability. And I see you've also done well for yourself. His eyes gleamed with malice. I've heard about a new protector, Ethan Sterling, isn't it? Quite influential in the city. Maria Eduarda's blood ran cold. How did Frank know about Ethan? I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. The whole hospital is commenting on the devoted husband who pays for everything, who stays here late, who acts like Pedro's father. Frank stepped closer, lowering his voice. I imagine what the press would think to discover that the powerful CEO Ethan Sterling is funding the medical treatment of his cleaning lady mistress. Get out of here, she whispered, trembling with rage. I'll leave, but I'll be back. Pedro is my son, Maria, and if you don't facilitate visits, maybe I'll have to seek my rights legally. Who knows? Maybe the press will be interested in the story. After Frank left, Maria Eduarda locked herself in the bathroom of the room and cried until she had no more tears. The veiled threats echoed in her mind. She knew what Frank was capable of. He had blackmailed her before when he had tried to force her to abort Pedro. Now, with Ethan in the equation, the stakes were much higher. Meanwhile, at Sterling Investments, Ethan faced his own storms. His constant absence had not gone unnoticed, and Regina Sterling, his mother, had scheduled an urgent meeting for that afternoon. Regina was a 60-year-old woman who aged with the elegance of someone who had always been powerful. A former socialite, widowed for 5 years, she dedicated her life to preserving the family name and ensuring that Ethan made the appropriate marriages and partnerships to maintain their empire. "Ethan, darling," she said upon entering his office, accompanied by Helen Monroe, her best friend and the biggest gossip-monger in high society New York. "I need to talk to you about some worrying rumors." "Mom, I'm busy." "Too busy to talk to your mother." Regina sat in the chair in front of the desk, crossing her legs authoritatively. "Helen has told me very interesting things. Apparently, you've been seen in unusual places. A public hospital, for example." Ethan stiffened. "St. Luke's Hospital is not public, but the patients you visit are of humble origin." Helen smiled with false sweetness. "One of your employees, I hear. A single mother. What was her name again?" "That's none of your business." "Of course it's my business." Regina stood up, walking to the window overlooking the city. "You are the CEO of this company, heir to a respected name. Any association of yours reflects on our family." "Association," Ethan repeated, dangerously calm. "Ethan," Helen interjected, "we all know that men have needs, but there are discreet ways to deal with that. Paying hospital bills for maids draws unnecessary attention, especially," Regina added, "when that same maid has a questionable past." Ethan's blood boiled. "Explain that." "Frank Carlson," Helen said, pulling a tablet out of her bag. "The child's father. He's just returned to the city, and he's talking to journalists, I know. Apparently your employee has an interesting story." Regina returned to the desk, placing her hands on it and facing her son. "Ethan, you're being used. This woman saw an opportunity in you and is taking advantage of it. Think about the position this puts us in. Especially now," Helen added, "that we're negotiating the merger with the Bradfords. You know how conservative they are about family reputation. The merger with the Bradford Group was crucial for expanding internationally. 3 years of negotiations, billions at stake, and Brittany Bradford, the patriarch's only daughter, had made her romantic interest in Ethan clear during the meetings. Ethan said, controlling his anger, "My personal life doesn't interfere with business. Your innocence is touching, son. But in this world, everything interferes, especially when it involves scandal." That night, Ethan arrived at the hospital later than usual, carrying the weight of his mother's words. He found Maria Eduarda sitting next to Pedro's bed, who was sleeping soundly. She seemed smaller, more fragile, and there was something in her eyes that alarmed him. "How is he?" Ethan asked softly. "Better. The doctors say he can be discharged tomorrow. And you seem worried." Maria Eduarda hesitated. How could she tell him about Frank without revealing the secrets of the past that still haunted her? How could she explain that Pedro's father wasn't just a man who had abandoned the family, but someone capable of destroying everything she touched? "Ethan," she said finally, "I think you should stay away from us." The statement hit him like a punch to the gut. "Why?" "Because this isn't right. You have a life, a position. I'm just—" "Don't finish that sentence." Ethan knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "Don't diminish yourself like that, but it's the truth. Look around us, Ethan. You're paying bills that aren't yours, taking care of a child who isn't your daughter, getting involved with a woman who what?" Maria Eduarda stared at him, tears in her eyes. "Who has a past that can destroy you." Before Ethan could respond, his phone vibrated with a message from Helen Monroe. It was a photo of him and Maria Eduarda kissing in the hospital hallway, taken by someone who had observed them. The message read, "Darling, be careful. Walls have eyes. Kisses, Helen." Ethan showed the photo to Maria Eduarda, who paled. "It started," she whispered. "What started?" "The destruction of everything you've built. Because of me." That night, Frank called Maria Eduarda again. "Did you see the photos, Maria? They're very intimate. It would be a shame if they reached the wrong newspapers. Or the Sterling family. Or his competitors. What do you want?" "Legal paternal recognition of Pedro. And child support appropriate for my new social status. Let's say $10,000 a month." "You're crazy. I'm being smart. You have 48 hours to decide." or all of New York will know the sordid story behind the romance of the century. When Maria Eduarda hung up the phone, she knew the net was closing in. On one side, Frank, with his threats and blackmail. On the other, high society New York, ready to destroy anyone who threatened its established order. And in the middle, Ethan, the man she loved desperately and now needed to protect, even if it meant losing him forever. The bomb exploded on a Friday morning when all of New York woke up to the headline in the city spotlight. Newspaper, Tycoon's Forbidden Romance, Sterling Investments. CEO abandons million-dollar deals for single mom maid. The report occupied 3 full pages, with photos of Ethan and Maria Eduarda at the hospital, intimate details of their personal lives, and exclusive testimonies from Frank Carlson, who presented himself as the abandoned father fighting for his son's rights. The article painted Maria Eduarda as a calculating opportunist who had seduced the millionaire boss, and Ethan as a powerful man who had abandoned business responsibilities for a passionate whim. Ethan discovered the scandal when he arrived at the office and found Regina waiting in his office, the newspaper plastered on the table like a death sentence. "This," she said, pointing to the open pages, "is the end of everything your father built." The photos were devastating. The kiss in the hospital hallway, Ethan holding Maria Eduarda's hands in the waiting room, him playing with Pedro in the room. Each image had been taken without them noticing, transforming intimate moments into public spectacle. "Edward Bradford called at 6 in the morning, Regina continued, her voice icy. "The merger is cancelled. They don't want to associate their family name with this scandal." Ethan read the report with growing horror. Frank had told a distorted version of the story, painting himself as a victim and suggesting that Maria Eduarda had used her son's illness to manipulate Ethan emotionally. There were insinuations about sexual favors in exchange for medical treatment and taking advantage of a vulnerable position. 15 years building this company, Regina continued, and you destroy everything for an affair with an employee. "It wasn't an affair," Ethan said, but his voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Then what was it, love?" Regina laughed bitterly. "Ethan, you've been used. This woman saw your loneliness, your neediness, and took advantage of it. She probably planned everything from day one." At the hospital, Maria Eduarda was living her own nightmare. Pedro had been discharged the previous morning and was at home with Mrs. Noosa, unaware of the storm that was engulfing the family. The calls didn't stop. Journalists wanting interviews, curious neighbors, acquaintances who had never been interested in her before. Joanne, the supervisor, appeared at the door of the apartment at noon with a somber expression. "Maria, honey, I need to talk to you." "Come in, Joanne. I can't stay long." "The company? They sent me to come here personally." Joanne held Maria Eduarda's hands with maternal affection. "You've been fired. Direct order from the board. The news was expected, but it still hurt like a stab in the back."
"For cause?"
"No, thank God. They claimed incompatibility with the corporate image. At least you'll be entitled to unemployment insurance." After Joanne left, Maria Eduarda locked herself in the room and cried until she had no more tears. Not for the dismissal. She had always known that would happen. She cried for what she was doing to Ethan, for the way her presence had destroyed everything he had built. The phone rang. It was Frank. "Did you see the newspaper? It turned out beautifully, didn't it?" "You're a monster. I'm a concerned father. And speaking of that, my proposal has changed. Now I want $20,000 a month in child support. And regulated visits. I don't have $20,000, Frank. You don't, but your millionaire boyfriend does." "Or did?" Frank laughed. "I heard he lost some deals today." "What a shame. Leave Ethan alone. He has nothing to do with this." "He does now. He chose to get involved in our life. Now he's going to pay the consequences." That afternoon, Ethan made the most difficult decision of his life. He canceled all his meetings and drove personally to Maria Eduarda's apartment. He needed to see her, to understand how they had reached this point, to fight for the only thing that gave meaning to his existence. He found her in the living room, packing some things into a cardboard box. Pedro was playing on the floor, oblivious to the storm around them. "Uncle Ethan!" Pedro ran to hug him, and Ethan felt his heart break as he realized how important that child had become to him. "Hi, champ! How are you feeling?" "Much better. Mommy said you helped me get better." Ethan looked at Maria Eduarda, who avoided his gaze. "Can we talk?" he asked. They went to the small balcony of the apartment, where the noise of the city muffled their voices. "I saw the newspaper," he said. "I imagined. I'm so sorry, Ethan, for everything. It wasn't your fault." Yes, it was. Maria Eduarda finally faced him, and he saw that she had cried a lot. "I knew this would happen. I knew Frank was capable of anything. I should have walked away when he called the first time. Why didn't you tell me about the threats?" "Because I knew you well enough to know that you would try to protect us. And you ended up doing exactly that." She pointed to the city below. "Look what happened. Your company, your business, your reputation. I destroyed everything. You destroyed nothing. Business can be rebuilt. And your family? Your mother? The people in your world?" Maria Eduarda shook her head. "Ethan, we're from different realities. I always knew that. That doesn't matter." "Yes, it does. It matters when your difference destroys everything you've built in life." Ethan approached, trying to touch her, but she stepped back. "Don't make this harder than it already is," she whispered.
"What are you talking about?"
"I'm leaving. Pedro and I are going to Albany, where my aunt lives. Away from the press, away from Frank, away from you." The statement hit him like a lightning bolt. "You can't be serious." "I am. It's the only way to protect you. As long as I'm here, they'll keep attacking. Your mother is right. I'm a problem you can't solve. Maria Eduarda, I love you." The words came out desperate, raw, loaded with all the vulnerability he had tried to hide. "I love you too," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "That's why I need to leave. This is crazy. We can face this together." "No, we can't." Maria Eduarda wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders, gathering all the dignity she had left. "You have a life to rebuild, businesses to save. You can't do that carrying the weight of my presence. What if I don't want that life without you? Then you'll have to learn, because I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself because of me." That night, as Ethan drove back home, his phone rang. It was Helen Monroe. "Darling, what a terrible situation. But you know Regina is right, don't you? This woman, she was clearly taking advantage of you." "Helen, Edward Bradford called me this afternoon. He said he might reconsider the merger if you resolve this situation quickly. And Brittany is still interested in you, you know." Ethan hung up the phone without answering. He arrived home, a 10,000-square-foot mansion that had never seemed so empty, and poured himself a whiskey. Then another, and another. At 3 a.m, drunk with loneliness and despair, he picked up the phone and called Maria Eduarda. "Hello?" Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Don't go," he pleaded. "Please, I can change everything. I can sell the company, give it all up, start from scratch anywhere." "Ethan, you're drunk." "I am. Because for the first time in my life, I found something that's worth it, and you want to take that away from me. That's not what I want. It's what I need to do." "Why?" "Because of Frank. I can deal with him." "It's not just Frank." Maria Eduarda sobbed on the other end of the line. "It's your whole world, Ethan. Your family, your friends, your business. They all see me as a threat. And maybe they're right. They're wrong. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, too. But sometimes loving someone means letting them go." The call ended, and Ethan remained holding the mute phone, feeling the ground open up beneath his feet. The next morning, Maria Eduarda, Pedro, and Mrs. Noosa took a bus to Albany. She didn't tell Ethan when they would leave, didn't leave an address. She simply disappeared, taking with her the heart of the most powerful man in New York and leaving behind only the memory of the purest love he had ever known. Ethan found the apartment empty when he went to look for her on Monday. Only a few marks on the wall where the furniture had been, and the echo of his own tears in the small space that once housed his only chance at happiness. Frank got what he wanted. Pedro gone, Maria Eduarda humiliated, and Ethan destroyed. The press was already forgetting about the scandal, moving on to the next story. High society New York sighed with relief at the return of order. And in the midst of all this, two broken hearts tried to learn to live with the weight of lost love. Drill. 3 months had passed since Maria Eduarda had arrived in the small town of Saratoga Springs, New York. Her Aunt Carol's house was simple but cozy, with a large backyard where Pedro ran free and a porch where Mrs. Noosa spent the afternoons crocheting. Far from the chaos of New York City, life had found a calmer, almost bucolic rhythm. Maria Eduarda had gotten a job at the local elementary school, helping in the office and taking care of the school lunch program. The salary was less than what she earned as a catering assistant, but enough to support the family modestly. Pedro had adapted well to the new school and made friends quickly. Superficially, everything seemed to be falling into place. But the nights were difficult. Alone in her room, Maria Eduarda struggled against the longing that gnawed at her from within. Longing for Ethan, for his grey eyes, for his big and gentle hands, for the way he looked at Pedro as if he were his own son. She had recurring nightmares about the morning she had seen the newspaper, with the despair on Ethan's face when she had told him she was leaving. Aunt Carol, a 60-year-old woman with the wisdom of someone who had seen a lot in life, noticed her niece's silent suffering. "Maria," she said one Saturday morning while they were preparing lunch together, "you can't live hidden forever." "I'm not hidden. I'm starting over." "You're running. It's different." "It's the only thing I can do, Aunt Carol. You don't understand the magnitude of what happened in New York. I understand that you love a man and abandoned him to protect him. But sometimes protecting someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for them." That afternoon, while Pedro was playing in the backyard, Maria Eduarda received an unexpected call. It was Joanne, her former supervisor. "Maria, honey, how are you?" "Good, Joanne. I miss everyone there. Listen, I know you asked us not to call, but something happened that you need to know." Maria Eduarda felt her stomach clench. "What is it?" "Frank showed up at the company last week. Said he wanted to know where you were, that he had rights over the boy. Started making a scene at the reception desk. And then, that's where it gets strange, Maria. Mr. Sterling showed up. I've never seen him like that. He looked like a lion defending his cubs. He kicked Frank out right away. Said if he kept bothering you, he'd sue him for harassment and threats." Maria Eduarda felt her heart race. Ethan was still protecting her, even after everything. "How is he, Joanne?" "Different. Thinner, more serious. Works even later than before, if that's possible." "But Maria," Joanne hesitated, "there's something else. I found out by chance, talking to Cindy from accounting. You know Frank works at his brother-in-law's company?" "I know, so?" "The company does service outsourcing. Guess who some of the clients were?" Maria Eduarda waited, sensing that the answer would change everything. "Helen Monroe. That socialite friend of Mr. Sterling's mother. She hired Frank for private investigations. That's how he got information about you, about the hospital, about everything. The revelation struck like lightning. Frank hadn't found out about her and Ethan by chance. He had been hired to investigate, to find something that could destroy the relationship." "Joanne, are you sure?" "Absolutely. Cindy saw the contracts. Helen paid $50,000 for Frank to get compromising information about any relationship of Mr. Sterling. They wanted to keep him away from you at any cost." After hanging up, Maria Eduarda stood on the porch for hours, processing the information. Everything had been orchestrated. Frank hadn't returned out of paternal love or for money. He had returned hired to destroy her and Ethan's happiness. Helen and Regina had used Pedro's absent father as a weapon to separate a couple that threatened their plans. That night she called someone she didn't expect, Milton, Ethan's driver. They had formed an unexpected friendship during the days at the hospital, and she remembered that he always said, "Anything you need, Mrs. Maria." "Hello, Milton." "Mrs. Maria, what a joy to hear your voice. How are you?" "And Pedro?" "We're fine, Milton, but I need your help." "Anything, ma'am." What can I do? I need you to tell me how Mr. Sterling is, really. Milton sighed heavily. Mrs., he's not the same man anymore. He works 16 hours a day, he's lost weight, he hardly talks to anyone. It's like he's just existing. And business? Bad, very bad. He's lost important contracts. The merger with the Bradfords is out of the question. Mrs. Regina keeps pressuring him to marry that Brittany Bradford, who says it's the only way to save the company. And him? He says he'd rather see everything fail than marry without love. Maria Eduarda felt tears burning her eyes. Even destroyed, Ethan remained faithful to what they felt for each other. Milton, can I trust you? With my life, Mrs. Maria, I found out something important about who really orchestrated our separation. I need to go back to New York. Mrs., that could be dangerous. They're still looking for ways to attack you. I know, but I can't let Ethan pay for a lie. He deserves to know the truth. What do you need me to do? Maria Eduarda took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she possessed. I need information. Contracts, documents, anything that proves the connection between Frank and Helen Monroe. And I need to get to New York without anyone knowing. It's going to be difficult, but I can try. I know people in the outsourcing company where Frank works. And I have a cousin who's an investigative journalist. Journalist? Cindy Scott from the Empire State Truth newspaper. She was investigating some blackmail schemes in high society when your scandal broke out. She might be interested in the real story. For the first time in 3 months, Maria Eduarda felt a spark of hope. Milton, can you arrange a meeting with her? I can, but Mrs., are you sure? If you come back and this goes wrong, they could destroy you for good. If I don't go back, they've already destroyed us. The difference is that this time I'm going to fight. After hanging up, Maria Eduarda found Aunt Carol in the living room, who had heard part of the conversation. Are you going back to him? I'm going back for the truth. Ethan deserves to know that he was manipulated, that our love wasn't a lie or a scam. And if you can't prove anything, then at least I'll have tried. I can't live the rest of my life knowing that I didn't fight for what we loved. Aunt Carol smiled, proud. That's the Maria I raised. Now tell me, what do you need for this war? In the days that followed, Maria Eduarda worked meticulously on the plan. Milton got Cindy Scott's contact information, who showed great interest in the story when she learned the details. The journalist had been investigating a blackmail scheme involving big businessmen, and Ethan's case fit the pattern perfectly. I've suspected Helen Monroe for a long time, Cindy said during a video call. She has a hand in many convenient separations in high society. If we can prove that Frank was hired by her, we have a bombshell. How do we do that? Leave it to me. I have sources in his company. And you, prepare to return. We'll need your courage to expose this publicly. Pedro, who had heard part of the conversation, approached his mother that night. Mommy, are we going back to see Uncle Ethan? Maria Eduarda kissed her son's forehead, feeling a steely determination grow in her chest. Yes, my love, we're going back. And this time, we're not going to run anymore. Meanwhile, in New York City, Ethan faced yet another disastrous meeting with investors. The company he had built was crumbling, and he seemed unable to find the motivation to save it. When he arrived home that night, he found Regina waiting with prenuptial marriage documents with Brittany Bradford. Ethan, we can't wait any longer. It's marriage or bankruptcy. He looked at the papers, then at the mother who had orchestrated the destruction of his only chance at happiness. I know what you did, he said calmly. What are you talking about? I know about Helen, about Frank, about the whole plan. Regina paled slightly, but maintained her composure. I know you hired Frank to separate us. The question is, do you still think it was worth it? Regina looked around the empty mansion at her thin and dejected son, at the shattered dreams around them. It was worth it, she said coldly. Because at least you're still a Sterling. Ethan tore the marriage documents in front of her. I'm nothing anymore. And you made sure of that. That same night in Saratoga Springs, Maria Eduarda was packing her bags. The war was just beginning, but she was finally ready to fight. A week later, New York City woke up to a new headline that shook high society. The conspiracy behind the scandal, how the New York elite orchestrated the destruction of a true love. Cindy Scott's report occupied the front page of the Empire State Truth, with photos of the contract signed between Helen Monroe and Frank Carlson, bank documents proving the payments, and even recordings of telephone conversations where Helen instructed Frank on how to blackmail Maria Eduarda. In the newspaper's newsroom, Maria Eduarda read the article with her heart racing. She had arrived in New York City 2 days before, staying discreetly at Milton's house, who had become a key ally in the investigation. Pedro had stayed in Saratoga Springs with Aunt Carol and Mrs. Noosa, protected from the storm that was about to hit the city. "It turned out perfect," said Cindy, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the addition. "I have sources confirming that Helen has already called 3 different lawyers this morning. And Frank? He disappeared. He's probably already on his way to another state." Cindy smiled with professional satisfaction. "But the damage is done. No one will believe his version of the story anymore." At Sterling Investments, the office was in turmoil. Employees whispered in the hallways, and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some were journalists wanting statements. Others were investors who had read the article and were beginning to reconsider their positions on Ethan. Regina arrived at the office like a hurricane, the newspaper folded in her hand. "Ethan, how did they get this information?" "I don't know," he replied, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been seen in months. "Maybe because some people still believe that the truth is worth something. This changes nothing. Maria Eduarda is still inadequate for you." "No." Ethan stood up, walking to the window overlooking the entire city. "Inadequate is me. Inadequate for her love, for her purity, for her courage. Ethan, for 3 months I've lived dead, Mom. Functioning on autopilot, fulfilling social protocols, being the son you wanted. And you know what I discovered? I'd rather be destroyed by true love than preserved in a lie." The phone on the desk rang. It was Carlotta, the secretary. "Mr. Sterling? There's someone here who wants to talk to you. Says it's very important. Who is it?" "Maria Eduarda Santos." The world stopped. Ethan felt his legs weaken and had to lean on the desk. "Send her up," he said, his voice almost inaudible. "Ethan, don't be ridiculous," Regina interfered. "You're not going to receive that. Get out." "What?" "Get out of my office, now!" Regina hesitated, seeing something on her son's face that she hadn't seen in years. Absolute determination, renewed strength, a man who finally knew what he wanted. "If you do this, you'll lose everything. I already lost everything when I let her go." The waiting minutes were eternal. Ethan adjusted his tie, ran his hands through his hair, tried to control the heartbeat that was out of rhythm. When the door opened and Maria Eduarda entered, he felt like he was breathing again for the first time in 3 months. She was thinner, her hair longer, but her brown eyes still had the same strength, the same dignity that had won him over from day one. She wore a simple and elegant navy blue dress and carried a folder of documents. "Hi," she said, and the word came out tremulous. "Hi." They looked at each other for long seconds, absorbing each other's presence, processing all the feelings they had tried to bury. "I read the report," Ethan said finally. "I imagined you would." Maria Eduarda took a few steps closer. "I needed you to know the truth, that nothing of what we lived was a lie or self-interest. I always knew." "You knew?" "Maria Eduarda." Ethan approached as well, until they were just inches from each other. "You don't know your own transparency. From day one, everything in you screamed honesty. That's why I fell in love." Tears began to stream down her face. "Then why didn't you fight for us?" "Because I thought you were right, that I was really dangerous for you and Pedro, that my world would only bring suffering. And now?" Ethan raised his hands, gently touching her face, wiping away the tears with his thumbs. "Now I know that the only true suffering is living without you. That I can rebuild any business, any fortune, but I can't rebuild my soul without you and Pedro. Ethan, marry me." The words came out unplanned, raw and urgent. Maria Eduarda gasped. "What? Marry me?" "Today, tomorrow, whenever you want. I don't care about ceremonies, about protocols, about approvals. I just can't spend another day pretending that I can live without you. And your family? Your business? Your whole world? You and Pedro are my world. The rest we rebuild together. Maria Eduarda threw herself into his arms, and the kiss that followed carried 3 months of longing, of pain, of repressed love. When they parted, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you." The door opened violently, and Regina entered, accompanied by Helen Monroe, both with furious expressions. "Enough of this nonsense, Ethan," Regina said. Helen came to explain herself, to say that it was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Maria Eduarda turned to face the two women, but remained in Ethan's arms. It was a well-orchestrated plan to destroy two people who loved each other. "You have no proof of anything," Helen said, but her voice betrayed nervousness. "I have all the proof." Maria Eduarda opened the folder she was carrying. Contracts, bank transfers, recordings. Everything Cindy Scott needed to write the article that's on the stands now. Regina took one of the copies of the documents and paled. "Helen, you said you were just going to investigate." "I did what was necessary to protect our family," Helen retorted. "This woman was going to destroy everything Ethan built." "The only thing that destroyed me," Ethan said, his voice loaded with an authority that made the two women step back, "was finding out that the people I trusted were capable of such cruelty. Ethan, she's an opportunist. She's the woman I love. And Pedro is the son I chose to have even without blood ties." Ethan straightened, assuming all his stateliness. "And if you can't accept that, it's your problem." Helen turned to Regina in despair. "Regina, do something." "I can't." Regina looked at her son, finally seeing the man he had become, not the puppet she had tried to create. "I can't because he's right. We were wrong, very wrong." The words were a shock to everyone in the room. Regina, the inflexible matriarch, admitting defeat. "Mom," Ethan began. "No," Regina raised her hand. "Let me speak. I've spent 3 months watching my son wither, watching him become a shadow of the man he was. I thought I was protecting our family, but in reality, I was killing my own son." She approached Maria Eduarda, who faced her without fear. "Do you forgive me?" Regina asked, and there was genuine sincerity in her voice. "For what we did to you and your family?" "I've already forgiven," Maria Eduarda replied. "Because holding a grudge only hurts the one who holds it." Regina smiled for the first time in months. "Now I understand why my son fell in love with you." Helen, seeing that she had lost her ally, left the room without saying a word. Her reputation in high society was destroyed, and she knew it would take years to recover, if she ever recovered. 2 weeks later, St. Francis Chapel was decorated with simple but elegant flowers. The ceremony was small and intimate, only family and true friends. Pedro, impeccable in his little suit, carried the rings with the pride of someone who would finally have the father he had always dreamed of. Mrs. Noosa, recovered and radiant, couldn't stop smiling. Aunt Carol cried with emotion. Milton was the best man, and even Regina, genuinely moved, helped Maria Eduarda get ready. When Ethan saw the bride enter the church, he felt that his life truly began at that moment. The simple white dress, the delicate veil, the radiant smile, she was perfect. "Do you accept Pedro as your son?" the pastor asked, in a special edition they had requested. "I do," Ethan replied, looking at the boy who watched him with adoration. "And I promise to love him and protect him as if he were my own blood." Pedro ran to hug him, whispering "Dad" for the first time. When they kissed as husband and wife, the entire congregation burst into applause. Tears of joy streamed down the faces of all those present. At the simple party that followed, in the garden of Aunt Carol's house, Ethan approached Maria Eduarda during the impromptu waltz. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, making her blush, "how do you feel?" "Complete," she replied. "For the first time in my life, complete. And afraid." "Of what?" "Of finding out that this is all a dream." Maria Eduarda laughed, that crystalline laugh that he had missed so much. "If it's a dream, may we never wake up." 6 months later, Sterling Investments had not only recovered from the losses, but had grown exponentially. The real story of Ethan and Maria Eduarda, told with honesty and courage, had transformed them into symbols that true love still existed. Contracts arrived from businessmen who admired the integrity demonstrated by the couple. The Bradford family itself, impressed with Ethan's moral strength, resumed merger negotiations. Pedro flourished in his new life. He attended an excellent school, had swimming and piano lessons, but more importantly, he had a present father who took him fishing on weekends and helped him with his homework every night. Mrs. Noosa had fully recovered and lived in the Sterling mansion, being treated like the queen of the house that she truly was. Maria Eduarda now graduated in business administration through a course that Ethan insisted on paying for. Worked as the company's director of social responsibility, creating programs for families in vulnerable situations. Frank never appeared again. Rumors had it that he was in another state, trying to rebuild his life away from the scandals that he himself had created. One night in December, while Pedro slept soundly and Mrs. Noosa watched her soap operas in the living room, Ethan and Maria Eduarda met on the balcony of their new home, observing the lights of the city that had once separated them and now united them. "You know what I'm thinking?" Maria Eduarda said, nestled in her husband's arms. "What?" "That sometimes the universe breaks us to rebuild us stronger, more truthful." Ethan kissed the top of her head, breathing in the perfume he had learned to associate with home. "And sometimes," he replied, "the universe gives us exactly what we need at the moment we're ready to receive it. Even if it doesn't seem like what we want, especially when it doesn't seem like what we want." Maria Eduarda turned in his arms, raising her face to meet his eyes. "I love you, Ethan Sterling. I love our family, our story, our life. And I love you more than I thought it was possible to love." The kiss that followed sealed not only the love between them, but the promise of a future built on the most solid foundation that exists. Truth, courage, and the certainty that some battles are worth fighting. When Pedro appeared at the balcony door, rubbing his sleepy eyes, they included him in the family embrace. "Dad, Mom, are you going to stay together forever?" "Forever, my son," Ethan replied. And for the first time in his life, he knew with absolute certainty that a promise would be kept. "Even when I get old?" "Especially when you get old," Maria Eduarda laughed. "And when you have your own children, and when they have theirs." Pedro smiled, satisfied, and went back to bed, secure in the unwavering love of his family. There, on the balcony of their home, embraced under the stars of New York City, Ethan and Maria Eduarda knew that they had found something rare and precious, a love that had survived all the storms and come out stronger on the other side. And for the first time in their lives, both could look to the future without fear. Because they had each other, they had Pedro. They had a real family built not only on blood ties, but on the daily choice to love, protect, and support each other. Love had won, and this time it was forever.